We thank you all for attending. I know that many people and they have commitments at 8:30. And alhamdulillah, brothers, I think they didn't realize that when they planned the lecture. But alhamdulillah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to put barakah and blessings. And it reminded me of a story of Imam Malik rahimahullah ta'ala, when one of his students, Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi, and they were attending his halaqah, and it was in Medina in the Prophet's mosque alayhi salatu wassalam, and a huge elephant came to Medina. And as you know, in the Arabian Peninsula, even though boxing is not from there, but boxing is there tonight, some things come there sometimes that are not from there, right? So elephants are not from the animals of Arabia. Most people, during those times, had never seen an elephant, only heard about elephants. So here this great elephant came in, and all of the people got up and left. So all of the students who were around Imam Malik, they got up and they left to go and see the elephant, except for this one student, Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi. So Imam Malik asked him, he said, "Why did you stay?" He said, "Have you seen the field? Have you seen an elephant before?" He said, "Innama rahaltu li ara malikan la li ara al-fil." He said, "My rihla, me leaving my country and coming to seek knowledge, it was for me to see Malik, not for me to see a field, not to see an elephant. So that's why I'm here, is to benefit from you. So why would I get up and go and see the elephant?" So alhamdulillah, even though in many of these things, sometimes you have boxing matches, you have an MMA match, or you have a football match that you might want to see. But when you ask yourself what is more beneficial, to come into the masjid and to benefit, and something that will really benefit me, a reminder from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's what we have to prioritize. And alhamdulillah, things are recorded. You can go home and watch the recording if you really want to watch it. But this is the opportunity we come, inshallah, together, inshallah, to benefit. When you look at the title of the lecture, Drugs to Deen, you might be surprised, because I'm actually one of the most law-abiding citizens that you might ever meet. Alhamdulillah, I'm a straight shooter. And it's very interesting now that I look at myself now and I kind of laugh, how I obey the laws to an extent. I mean, even when I was moving from Ireland, I made sure that all of my taxes were paid. Any money I made that in the UK or in Ireland, I gave it to my accountant, I gave him my bank statement, all the things, and he went and made sure that all of the taxes were paid. And I laughed and I said, "SubhanAllah, look how I was before Islam, living the life of a criminal, and now I make sure I don't want to break any laws. I want to make sure everything is crystal clear, and everything is the paperwork is complete and everything, that I'm a straight shooter, subhanAllah. And abiding by all of the laws, even like with the traffic signals and all of that." So when I think about my life before Islam and I look at myself now, and I laugh. But that's what the impact that Islam has upon us. And sometimes the road that you might reach to Hidayah, it can be a rough road. And that's how it was for me. I was born in America. My father is from Irish descent and my mother is English. And we have a bit of Cherokee Indian as well from my mother's side, from her great grandmother, who was a Cherokee Indian, the Native Americans. So subhanAllah, I was raised in a good household. Both of my parents were hardworking and both of them were very successful. But at the age of 5, my parents ended up separating and I lived with my mother. And generally speaking, most of the time, a household built upon the mother only, it's usually not the best place for tarbiyah for the children. The mothers are usually soft, and sometimes when they're hardworking, like my mother, who was never around in the first place, I kind of ended up raising myself, which was me and my sister, from a young age. So I started getting into a lot of trouble. I even remember at the grade 2, they sent me to a Catholic school because my family were Catholics and they were practicing to a big extent. So I stayed for 1 year in the Catholic school, but then they ended up kicking me out because of my great behavior and as a role model citizen, a role model student at that time. They ended up kicking me out and not allowing me to come back. So I went to public schools and I ended up getting in a lot of trouble, ended up actually failing 1 grade, but then I ended up skipping another grade later on than that to get back into my normal grade. So even from the elementary, or you call it the primary level here, that subhanAllah, I was always in a lot of trouble. Even sometimes they would put me in special classes and this, just to be able to to try to control me anyways. So I was always in a lot of trouble from a young age. But I was involved in sports and American football, basketball, baseball, the normal American sports. We don't play soccer very much in America, as you might see. Huh? And I remember that the soccer for us, that was what girls used to play. And we used to play American football during that time. No offense to you guys in the UK, but that's how it was in our days. It is getting more popular now in America, but it wasn't during my days at all. So subhanAllah, when I reached into grade 7, which we call middle school, also I was a very special student and very unique. So much so that I remember in a meeting that the principal of the school, or the vice principal at that time, Miss Robinson, she sat down with my parents and she said, look here, she showed a filing cabinet and she said, these are the referrals. Referrals mean when we get kicked out of the class, the teacher writes a referral, a complaint about you. She said, these are the referrals for grade 7, these are for grade 8, and this cabinet, it's all for your son. And I have my own special drawer, all just referrals for me. It was like in the hundreds. And I would always get kicked out of class, always in trouble. So they said that we can't deal with him. It's just never happened in the history of the school. I was more of a class clown and just, getting in trouble, getting in fights and things like that a lot. So she said that we have to send him somewhere to like a special needs school or something. We can't deal with him anymore, He's intelligent, but he's getting in trouble too much for us to be able to handle in the school. So my dad said, no need for that. He can come move with me. And my dad, he's, Irish, hardworking, typical, quiet guy, but if you step out of line, he'll knock you out, And I knew that, and that's kind of what I needed in my life. And I think more hardcore than him was his wife, my stepmom. She was tough, subhanAllah. She was really, really tough. She was a country girl from the countryside, redneck from America, from West Virginia, and she was tough in how she used to raise me. So I lived with them. I say this was my prison term for 3 years. And it was very similar to a prison because we lived, and my father was very well off. He lived on a house that was 27 acres, mashallah, big house on the top of the hill. But obviously there's nowhere to go. So basically almost like you're in prison. So I found like a way out, and something to really enjoy was my love for basketball. So I started to get more and more into basketball, so much so that I would go early morning I wake up at 5 a.m. and I'll have my oatmeal porridge, as you say. I'm getting my, actually, to be honest with you, many of the terms, the British terms, I start to use them more now. So American people are like, hey, what's that? Let's open the boot, And they're like, what is a boot, Oh, the trunk. I forget because I'm in the UK all the time. I use the UK words more, subhanAllah. So I'd have my porridge in the morning and get ready to go. And I go and train with my coach one-on-one. We train from about 6 a.m. to about 7:15 a.m. every day. And then, hit the showers, get dressed, and go to school. Right after school, we go into the gym, lift weights, and then we'd play. And our gym was very known for the older guys coming in. We played from sometimes from 4 all the way up to 10 p.m. Now, I didn't do much studying during that time, as you can imagine, always just playing basketball. But I got very, very good at basketball, especially when it came to the three-point shooting. I was always good at defense and a lot of other things, and even shooting close to the rim. But when it came to that, I became a professional three-point shooter. And they always say on the court, don't let the white boy shoot, because I would light him up. I became a professional. So I became very, very good. I'm very, very confident, a bit cocky in my game. And until one day, I remember in grade 10, I felt something very strong grasp my arm. And it was my coach who had spent a year, helping me get to the level I had reached. And he would grab my arm, and he had some very colorful things to say to me, very painful. He only had one arm because he got in a car accident, but the guy was a beast. I mean, he was, he's jacked in his arm, and he could play basketball with one arm better than most people with 2 arms. It was amazing. So he grabbed my arm very hard, and it's just a lot of beep, 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 beep. We're in school, and he's cussing at me. And he's like, what have you done? And I said, what are you talking about? He said, you're ineligible. I don't know if the same system in the UK, if you have a school, student athletes, you have to have a certain GPA, certain grade point average. So I was below. I had to have 2.0, and I was below that because I never studied. I always played basketball. That was it. So he told me, he said, you messed everything up. And he said, but I found a solution. One of my teachers happened to be the football coach. He's going to give you some extra classes after school for 2 weeks to make your GPA up to a B, so you'll be eligible. But then beep, 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 beep. If you do it again, you're in beep, beep, beep. He was very upset. Anyways, I finished that year. I did very well in basketball. And then during that summer of my 10th grade year, I had enough of my stepmother. She was very military, it is what it is, And she was tough. I remember one night I was sleeping. I just fallen asleep. And she said to me, she came and woke me up. And she said, you left something on the counter, which you're supposed to clean up upstairs. I'm used to my mother. She would mother clean up after me. Mother wouldn't say anything like this. So I go upstairs and there's like a few crumbs. I was like, it's only crumbs. You could have just done like that. It would have been finished. She said, no, it's not my job. It's your job to clean up after yourself. I realized the wisdom behind this later, subhanAllah. After I became Muslim, I realized the wisdom, and I told her how much I loved her, how much I respected her, how much I thanked her for what she used to try to do for me. But I didn't understand it then, subhanAllah. So this being the case, I had enough of her. I decided to move back to my mother's. I moved back to my mother's, being good at basketball. I find myself looking for the good games in the area. Now I'm back closer to the inner city. We were from a place in Alexandria, Virginia, which is very close to Washington, D.C. And it's just like 5 minutes for us to go over the bridge and we're in D.C. So all of the good basketball games or the courts, they were usually in the more of the inner city type of areas. So I found myself being more involved with the African American community and have a lot of African American friends. And I was always into rap and hip hop and these things. And even the way I used to dress was very similar to the way the rappers would dress and what have you. And I remember one time there were some girls in my class, and they mentioned they thought I was cute, but they said they didn't like the way I dressed, because the way I dressed like I was from New York, which was really looked down upon in the DC area, which I didn't know the difference at the time. And they introduced me to one of their friends, and he became one of my best friends, like a family member, but he's the one who taught me the life of crime. He taught me all of the evil things there is to learn on earth. He's the one who taught me. So first of all, he took me over to his house, introduced me to himself, and got to know him. He took me out behind the shed and he started to roll up a blunt. I said, what is this? And I didn't know anything about this. And he says, all the gangsters get high. All of them smoke weed, And he started so that was the first experience with that. And then he started to show me how to dress and how they dress in DC with the Timbs and the roughed up Timberland boots and the baggy jeans, polo shirt, sweatshirt. Not like they do in New York, hat to the side. That stuff doesn't work here. No jewelry, even though I did wear a little bit of jewelry even after that, but all the gold chains, all that, it wasn't the thing in DC. So we started to learn that lifestyle. And then maybe a few months later, I was always there at his house, always hanging out with him. All of a sudden, his brother and his cousin, they come and they're visiting from a neighboring state. They're from the South, from the country, from North Carolina. Even though the people from North, by the way, they consider us to be country, from Virginia, but we don't consider ourselves to be country. We consider the ones down south from us to be country people. So they roll up, and one of them rolls up in like a Corvette with these, the shiny rims and the big speakers in the back. The other one rolls up in this big 4x4 Jeep, the same thing, decked out, big gold chains on, gold teeth. That's how they do it down the country. In New York, it's the same, but in DC, it's against the rules. But nonetheless, it was something impressive to see something like that. And I was like, what do they do for a living, because they're unemployed, right? So then he taught me, obviously, what they were into, and selling drugs and being involved in that lifestyle. And then you see that, just for a little bit of work, how much money you can make, and you can live the lifestyle you want to live, which is, partying, smoking weed, and, being with girls and things like that. So that became a part of our life as well. And that's the path we followed down. And I thought about it, you're making $1,000 a day profit, and that's $30,000 a month. Then you're making more than most Americans make in an entire year, and you're enjoying yourself. So why choose another job? So I was focused on my new, I don't know what we call it, art, new job, new occupation. And I ended up stopped going to school. Obviously, I'm busy. I got things I'm doing. I don't have time to go to school 8 hours a day or whatever it was. And I would come home about 4 a.m. in the morning and 5 a.m. and I would go to sleep. I've been out working all night. My mom would try to wake me up for school, but I can't go anywhere at that time. And it became, a very crazy time. And I was telling even one of the brothers earlier that, subhanAllah, the effect that music has on you. And my father used to tell me this. He used to say, be careful of the music you listen to. He didn't tell me don't listen to music because he didn't have halal and haram. But he'd say, don't listen to this negative music you're listening to because it affects you negatively. And the reality is this type of rap music, gangster rap music we used to listen to, it was like, your constitution of how you lived. So I remember I got in an issue with some guys from a local neighborhood where they had tried to start some stuff with us. We came back about 15 deep. They ended up running away from their own neighborhood. Who was the driver? It was the white boy. Therefore, they were always out trying to get me. They came to our school a few times. They're always looking for me. Therefore, I always had to walk around with a gun. So every day, I would have to go to school with a gun. There wasn't they wouldn't check you like they do in the schools now, but that was back in the early 90s. So every day, I'd have to go to school with a gun. And I'd have to make sure, because as in the rap songs, make sure there's one in the chamber, there's not on safety, which is pretty stupid, You can end up shooting yourself in the leg. Actually, one of our friends did, shot himself in the leg. We would go to school like that with the gun every day, under the mattress. So after you put on your clothes, you take out it's like part of the uniform now. You have to lift up the mattress, put the gun in, and you go to school. And like watching the door, is someone coming for you or not. So it was a crazy lifestyle that we started to live. Ended up not going to school in the end. I mean, when I saw recently my attendance, I was absent for most of the year. And this is in grade 11. We had to grade 12 in the American system. And then after that as well, we had, I was suspended for like 30 of those days anyways. One time for having a cell phone, which obviously caused me a lot of problems. Why do you have a cell phone being 15 years? There was no cell phones back in the day. It was something like really one of those big ones, that you're not supposed to have, except for if you're a big businessman, which anyways, we were trying to make our way in life. So the point is that I ended up getting suspended several times, fighting all of this. And then eventually not even going to school. I never even finished school. Stopped going altogether. Didn't finish grade 11, didn't go to grade 12. So about 2.5 years, I'm in this crazy cycle. I was in several shootouts. Alhamdulillah, I never got shot, but almost several times. And, the lifestyle was just very crazy. And I realized, and when you hear the issue about selling your soul to the devil, that's basically it. I realized at the end of this lifestyle that I'm either going to be in prison or I'm going to be killed. One of the two. And even my friends thought the same for me because I took things to other levels. I was really crazy during the time. And subhanAllah, I just started going deeper and deeper. And one of the things that really impacted me, and this is something that the youth, might not realize, and that is reading. Even though I was into this gangster lifestyle and this crazy lifestyle, I used to read. So read things that were interesting to me. So one of the things I read was the biography of Malcolm X, rahimahullah. So that had an impact on me, and it implanted in my mind something about Islam. And even several of the rappers in that time, they talked about Islam in their music. So I had the word Islam in my mind. But just like today, when the media propagates Islam as being terrorism and all this nonsense that we hear on the news, during my days, it was about the Nation of Islam. There was this guy called Khalid Muhammad. They were always putting him on the news and his racist comments. And how Islam is the religion for the black man and the white man's the devil. So this is what I have in my mind about Islam. So one day, the guy who I used to buy my drugs from that I used to sell, his father was a Muslim, subhanAllah, Revert, African-American brother. And I went to meet him, and he was, my friend was very forgetful, which ended up being a blessing for me, a blessing in disguise. So I went to his house. His father said, he's not here, but you can wait downstairs. In the beginning, his father didn't really like me. He thought I was white guy, he's got to be a cop, what is this? I was very nervous. But after he got to know me, he got used to me, I realized I was in the same nonsense his son was in, no difference, just the color of the skin. So he used to let me in the house and things like that, and he was cool with me. So he told me to come in and said, wait downstairs. During our days, it was Sega was the thing. Huh? Have you guys heard of Sega, the little guys? They still have Sega around these days? Sega, alhamdulillah. Sega. So he told me go play with the Sega downstairs. That's PlayStation, if you didn't know, for our days. Huh? So we went down. I went downstairs. It wasn't there. I noticed when I entered the house, he was listening to some cassette tapes, which you guys have never heard of before, the young guys. Huh? He was listening to what are cassette tapes today? And even DVDs, you can't use the example because nobody uses them anymore, right? Audios, anyway, about the Quran in Arabic and then the English translation. He was reading in his English translation as he was listening, subhanAllah. So I had in my mind about, about Islam, and I have questions about Islam. So I went up and sat on the steps and started listening. And then I asked him, can I come in? Can I listen? And I remember I stepped on his prayer rug with my team. He's like, no, you can't step on the prayer rug, And I sat down and started to talk. And the first question I asked, could I be a Muslim? And as a white guy, this white devil, right? And he told me, he said, this has nothing to do with Islam. He said, these people, Nation of Islam, they're not Muslims. He said, if you're white, black, he said, if you're purple or pink, it doesn't matter which color you are. You can be a Muslim. Islam is for everyone. So we started to talk about Islam, and after I finished asking some questions, I asked him once again, do you have some material, something I can read? And he gave me some books about Islam. One of them was called The Religion of Truth. And I read another was about Jesus and Islam. I read about Jesus and Islam on the way back on the metro as I was going home. And then I was 18, crazy, living that lifestyle. I forgot about the books. About 2 months later, we were coming back from inside of DC into the area we lived in, across the bridge. And we had this thing we would do back in the day. We would smoke the weed in the car with the windows rolled up, so they had a bigger impact, I guess. So we're in another world coming back, we're just in our own world, and then you're like focused in front, you don't see much going on around you. So this guy pulled in front of me, he was driving a big Benz, pulled in front of me from the other lane. He made the mistake, but I didn't have a driver's license, and I'm driving a car that has fake license plates on the back and all of this, and it was my kind of, little getaway car. And we got in an accident, tried to start the car, it wouldn't go. So I realized that being, as high as I was, being, having the weed in the car, on our possession, not having a driver's license, having these fake license plates, I said, you know what, you're about to go to jail. And I realized that I'm going to jail. So I stayed there waiting for the police to take me, but they didn't come. Even though in that area there was police everywhere, it was crazy. At that area, but this for some reason didn't come. 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, they're not coming. So I'm starting to think now, why don't you just run? Since they're not coming, hey, it's their fault. You waited, they didn't come. The car, everything in the car, get it, buy a new one, no big deal. Just run for it. What do you have to lose? So I'm looking up the hill in front of me, and I know the hill in front of me, which this hill, by the way, has a very significant, it's very significant in my story, subhanAllah, this hill, and the street that's on the other side of the hill. I know my friend, he lives there. How do I get there? There's like these woods on the, after you run up the hill. I don't know exactly where the house is, but I have an idea with the direction. So I just run, It's like, hey, stop. I run. It's really like a Hollywood movie here. So I'm running the branches and I'm going on this, and on the other side, I know the house should be here. And I just jump out, and sure enough, it's my friend's house. I find him and his dad under the hood of their car, working on the car. So I just jump in, His dad kind of realizes, he's up to no good, but he didn't, and the police are everywhere. They're looking with their lights and stuff like this afterwards. And so he realized I was up to no good, but he didn't turn me in. So I stayed there for a couple of hours, ended up going home the next day. Now, I don't have my car anymore, and I've been just kind of sitting around my grandparents' house, and they were very, normal people. So they didn't have much to do in the house. There wasn't, like cable TV or anything like that. It was very basic, their house. So I got, very bored one night. It was a Thursday night. And then I remembered I have these books about Islam. And that's the important thing about da'wah, is that sometimes you plant the seed. Maybe it doesn't benefit someone now, it benefits them later. Or maybe it doesn't benefit them, it benefits someone else. They come and they find the book that you planted the seed 2 years ago. Someone else finds it at that house. I remember one brother, he accepted Islam and he found the Quran that his parents had from 20 years ago when he found it in their library. He read the Quran and Allah guided him to Islam, alhamdulillah. So I remember these books that I had. I read the book called The Religion of Truth. And even though I was 18, I had kind of realized that, my life from some aspects wasn't the best. I needed to improve myself in many aspects. So I sat down and wrote my goals, 5 or 6 goals that I wanted to accomplish in my life. And I realized one of them, for example, was, obviously my money situation, have it very good. When it comes to the women, the cars, I have the goals when it comes to that. And then when it came to my health, I felt, you're drinking, you're smoking weed. You can imagine that you're not in the best of health, especially since I used to be an athlete. all of a sudden now, I remember that from the young age, when we were young, we'd run from the police. They could never catch us. One day I was walking down the road with one of my friends, and there was these Mexican guys. They had been drinking, and they were drunk. So we're walking, minding our business, didn't pay attention to them. And one of them says to us, and he's just walking out of the blue, and he said to us, F you. We didn't say anything to the guy. But obviously, where we're from, if someone says that to you, I mean, just not, excuse me, sir, no, you're going to get beat down now. So I took off my belt. We had the belt we used to wear, the style, we had like metal buckles all around it, wrapped it around my hand, and just swung for his face. As I was swinging, I noticed there was a police car watching us from the back, just creeping in, So as I punched him, then I started to run. And I said, this beer bottle that he has in his hand is going to come from my head. Duck down. I ducked down and went into the schoolyard, and sure enough, the beer bottle cracked on the side. My friend now, he's with two of them. So he's like, this guy ran. Was this punk? He ran away. Then he sees the police siren. Ooh, he realized why I ran. He runs after me. So I'm running through the schoolyard, normal day in my life, running from the police, like I did ever since I was young. But now when I got to the fence, we'd hit like half of the fence, hit the next part on our stomach, do a flip over it, and run like it was no thing back in the day. I got to the wall now, I'm like, and I had to sit down. I said, Khalas, if they come around in their car, I'm gonna get caught. I can't run anymore. And I couldn't breathe because of the smoking and all of this stuff. So I realized I had to make some changes in my life when it came to my health. Also, I felt there was something spiritually missing. So I wanted to add that, to my list of what to do spiritually. And my idea was to be a better Christian. I was born and raised as a Catholic. I used to wear my little gold cross on my little necklace. So I said, I want to be a better Christian. I try to read the Bible time and time again, but I found it very boring. Couldn't really get through it. But that was my objective, But my outlook was like, you see like the mafia guys, right? Who, they kill someone during the night, involved in some, robbery, and then they're in the church the next day, and they give some sadaqah and things like that to the church, and they live their life. That's my spiritual, objectives. I want to be something like that, and where I have some spirituality in my life with the life of crime that I'm living. I had no intention to leave that lifestyle, but just to be more spiritual with that kind of criminal lifestyle. That was my objective. So when I started to read about Islam, right away, things jumped out at me. And there was, 4 major things in that book that I read that really impacted me. And one of them was, the first thing, or the biggest thing that impacted me was that of the Tawheed, La ilaha illallah. And that's why it's very important for the du'a to understand when we look into, scientific miracles, into this. The key thing you make da'wah to is the same thing that the Prophet ﷺ made da'wah to, which is La ilaha illallah, Tawheed. And that's what guides the people at the end. Because that's the difference between Islam and between other religions. So subhanAllah, this really had an impact on me. The issue of the one true God, going straight to God, not being in any influenced by, or not having to go like to confession like we used to in the church, go sit in the box with the priest, forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. I used to find that to be very spooky, very freaky. And now I said I can just go straight to God, straight to the Creator. I said, this is amazing. This is what I need. So I ended up, being, truly impacted by that. Another thing was how the Muslims use the toilet. He mentioned in the book, I don't know, for some reason, talking about being pure in your prayer, not having impurities on you. So he said a Muslim, first of all, he secludes himself. And secondly, he sits down so he doesn't have impurities on his clothing. So I said, that makes sense. Because all my life, I never understood the issue of, urinating next to another man. I mean, that's like a private time, focus. And you're doing your thing, and you go, oh, did you see the game? You see the fight last night? What about the weather? I was like, dude, this is not time for that, man. This is time, let me concentrate on what I'm doing here, So I kind of felt that wasn't natural. I didn't like that. And then one time, honestly, I was probably drunk during that time, but I ended up sitting down and urinating one time. I was like, man, this makes sense. It's much easier than, having to aim and stand up and like this. You just sit. That makes my life much easier. So when I'd be by myself, sometimes I would sit down because I found it made more sense to me. I couldn't tell anybody that because they think that you're not a man if you sit down, right? But I found the Muslims sit down so they don't get impurities on their clothing. I said, wow, I've been doing that for a couple of years myself. It makes sense, right? I mean, it's much easier. So that's just something that had an impact on me. Sometimes we don't realize you might implement a sunnah and it has an impact on someone's life. We've been guided to Islam because a Muslim wears his trousers. Trousers, once again, this is for you guys. We say pants. Huh? I know pants means something else in the UK, so you have to be careful. Huh? So the trousers are above what? Above the ankles. And people have been guided to Islam just because someone implemented the sunnah, subhanAllah. Maybe because of the beard, maybe because of that. When you implement the sunnah, people can be guided. So alhamdulillah, this had an impact on me. The third thing was the system. You have the 5 pillars, you have the halal is clear, the haram is clear, clear guidelines, and the discipline. I really, really liked that. And I felt I needed that discipline. It was missing in my lifestyle. And the fourth thing was in the hereafter that you get awarded according to your actions, not according to your belief. In Christianity, everyone who dies, a good Christian who goes to the church, he's in a better place now. The dude from the mafia who killed someone before he died, he's in a better place now. Then who's going to hell if everyone's in a better place? It didn't make sense to me, right? So the Muslim in the book, he said, even if you're a Muslim, if you don't do good deeds, you can go to hell as well. You get rewarded according to your action and what you did. I said, that's adl, that's justice, and that makes sense. After reading the book, it was like 70 plus pages. I read it all on that night, on Thursday night. I decided the next day I wanted to become Muslim. This is the way, clear, no doubt about it. 18 years old, living that crazy lifestyle. Didn't think I was going to change the lifestyle, but ended up calling the brother and telling him I want to become Muslim. He made the same mistake that most Muslims make all around the world, which is what? Telling me, okay, brother, mashallah, come into the Islamic Center to make your shahada in front of everyone. Is that what you have to do when someone wants to accept Islam? Right then, say, repeat after me, brother. You ready? You sure? You believe? Repeat after me. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. That's what he should have done. Because what happened? Anything can happen after that, right? And we had a whole other maybe 10, 12 hours until Maghrib time at the masjid we were supposed to go to in Washington, D.C. Anyways, I ended up going, alhamdulillah. Shaitan wasn't able to distract me from the trip. Got on the metro, went to meet the brother. He took me to the Islamic Center in Washington, D.C. I still remember I was standing there, my Tommy Hilfiger sweatshirt, my baggy Guess jeans, had my diamond earring here, a little gold chain that I used to wear inside that came out as I prayed Maghrib without tahara, without iman. I didn't take my shadow before the salat. So I prayed with the Muslim. He said, just do like us. And then he told me, he said, afterwards you stand up, you say the shahada. I said, what is this shahada? And he said, I was like, what's that, dude? And he's like, he said, in Arabic it means I bear witness that there's no deity worthy of worship except Allah, and that Muhammad is his messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And I said, can I just say that in English? I couldn't learn Spanish. I can still only say uno, dos, tres, cuatro, cinco, seis. I'm still only can't count to 6. I never got higher than that. My language skills are not too good, even though I learned Arabic later, alhamdulillah. But at that time, I wasn't confident in my language skills. So I said, can I just say in English? He said, no, you have to say in Arabic. I said, it's impossible. No way I can say that you just said. And he said, no, trust me, it'll be easy. Huh? So when we stood up, as we say in Arabic expression, in zay al-asl, just like honey, kal asl, that it comes off the tongue like honey, very easily. It came off the tongue. I took my shahada. Everyone came and started hugging me, which is a bit weird. By the way, you guys don't realize that. New Muslim, you got a bunch of men hugging you, like, whoa, what's going on here? And didn't know this, It's right up, brother, like, good handshake. And that's it, and that's a scary thing, I think, for a new Muslim sometimes, The first thing he hears when you take the shahada is what? Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! He's like, whoa, don't they see that when they, it's from the media. And then all of a sudden you got a bunch of men hugging you. It's a bit strange where we're coming from, We don't get that type of love, That type of love means something else in the society we're coming from. Bismillah. Huh? So alhamdulillah, the brothers sat with me, and then there were some brothers, Pakistani brothers who I met, who were from very close to the masjid where I used to live, 2.7 miles from my house. I used to walk there most of the time 5 times a day after I became Muslim. So they showed me about the masjid. On the way home, obviously they told me the big mistake, which I talked about on Instagram the other day. If any of you followed the Instagram post, I think it was yesterday actually, about the mistake of changing my name. And that's why I put it on the poster. I was going to change my name back, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do it because everyone knows Abdurraheem. No one knows poor Stephen, even though it's a beautiful name, beautiful meaning. My father named me that. So I should have stayed with my name. It's always better if we have a new Muslim that we keep his name. And because the Prophet ﷺ only changed the name if it had a negative meaning. If there's no negativity in the name, nothing goes against Islam. You had some of the Sahaba were named Abdul Shams, like Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh. In this case, someone's named Abdul Shams, meaning the servant or the worshipper of the sun. Yes, we change something like this. But something doesn't have a bad meaning. So you say, what Muslim name do you want? I don't know any Muslim names. Only Muslimish name I knew was from the movie that Tupac was in, was Juice, was the guy who was Rahim. So I said, Rahim, that's a Muslim name. I said, I'll be naming Rahim. He said, okay, Abdurraheem. So they gave me the name Abdurraheem from day one. Bismillah. And it was in what? January 1994. In the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. We drove back to Virginia and they took me to the mosque and for some reason gave me very hot water to make wudu in. I didn't understand it. The brother who was with me didn't understand it either. He said, you don't actually need the hot water if you don't need it. I said, no, I don't need it actually. It's like scalding water. I don't know. Sometimes some of our elders, they have some strange things. So anyways, they asked me if I could go with them and learn a bit about Islam the next couple of days. Some young brothers who were practicing brothers, my age, they told me about the earring and the necklace and things like this. I took it off. It's not, you're not supposed to wear that as a Muslim man. Started to learn more and more about my religion. And I became, inspired. I became inspired to learn about the Sunnah. I mean, I go through my books with the highlighter. Anything that was from the Sunnah, I would write it down. I tried to implement it. Within a month, I started wearing, the thobe, and I started to grow my beard out. I actually have a picture. If you go back to my Instagram account, what I looked like maybe about 4 or 5 months. It was my passport picture. Like 4 or 5 months after I became Muslim, I have a little kufi on and a smaller beard. But even before I was Muslim, by the way, I had a beard. I always had a beard. And it was always, I didn't look at, a person to have a beard, it wasn't really a manly thing. I didn't never like it even before Islam. I had a small beard. Obviously, I didn't have this type of beard. It wasn't the style then, even though it is the style now, by the way. Huh? I remember when I first came back to the West, I would see the beard. I was like, I was in Ireland, I saw these brothers with big beards, like, Assalamu alaikum, brother. Looking at me like, what's this guy talking about, And I didn't realize, it was a style now where everyone has a big beard, subhanAllah. So even before I was Muslim, I had the beard, but I started to let it grow out, started to wear, I was wearing the turban, man. I was wearing the turban, had the thobe on, I was wearing the Pakistani stuff as well. I was into it, I even walked around with a cane for some time. I thought this was from the Sunnah as well. So I was just started, anything I thought was from the Sunnah, I tried to implement it. Got the big maswak in my pocket, and alhamdulillah. So I started to learn more, but I realized from a young age that I had to, if I really want to learn knowledge, I had to go outside. The question before that comes, how did my family react to me becoming Muslim? I'm from a practicing Christian family, Catholic, from my father's side. From my mother's side, they're Baptists, even though my mother became Catholic because she kept marrying Irish guys. So I guess they influenced her and she became Catholic. And their reaction was, surprisingly very well. They were very happy I became Muslim because Islam changed me. Within a couple of weeks, within a month, I was transformed to a totally new person. I started leaving the life of crime, even though I tried to go back to it. But then I found the verses in Surah Hud that the one who wants the life of this dunya, that Allah will give him, and then he'll have the punishment in the hereafter. So when I thought I was going to go back to selling drugs as an occupation, I was going to be a good Muslim, but I was going to sell drugs to make my money. I didn't want to get a job, making $4 or $5 an hour. I'm making hundreds of dollars an hour now to this. So I decided, when I found these ayat that had a big impact on me in Surah Hud, ended up leaving that lifestyle. And so the Quran was a guide for me in the beginning, subhanAllah. It was a true guide because any challenge I would face, I would find the answer in the Quran. Even though it's the English, it's a translation, right? But I would find the answer in the Quran. So alhamdulillah, I ended up reading the entire Quran cover to cover, and it really helped me in my transformation. And something else that really helped me was the street I told you about. First of all, that street was very interesting. And I thought about that when it says, I was actually born on that street because the street, it comes down like this, and then it turns like this and it comes down like that. And that's actually where I was born, on the top part of the street. The other part of the street where my friends used to live, that's where my main criminal activities used to go down. That's where I used to do my dirt there, on the same street where I was born. Even though we moved to a different area, a nicer area, I ended up coming back to where I was born. So that's where I used to do all my nonsense. Then the story, when I ran from the police, I ran back to that street and I was saved then. And then one of my friends, and this is one of my best friends, his cousin, who was one of our role models, people we looked up to, he was sent to prison at the age of 17, to the adult prison. This guy was a proper gangster. All of a sudden one day, I hear this knock at my door, my hotel door, before I became Muslim, obviously. I hear the knock at the hotel door, and I see this buff dude, I always heard about him, he's the legend. And there he is at my door with his cousin. He walks in, The whole bed is full of money. I'm like, man, this dude could just rob us right now. He's just jacked, you know. He would kill us with his bare hands. Doesn't even need a weapon. And he was cool. He said, oh, you're making your money, good thing. Gave us some advice, some tips, because that's what he used to do as well. He said he's trying to go straight now. But eventually the life of crime led him back. What did I hear after he became Muslim? He's on death row. Ended up being executed. It was lethal injection or electric chair. I think it was a lethal injection. Anyways, he shot 6 people with the gun he had. 5 of them died. The lady he shot ended up not dying, testified against him. He was executed after that, subhanAllah. He was one of our role models that we looked up to and before Islam. And many of the people around us who had got killed, who got AIDS, you hear the stories after you become Muslim, and these people, what happened to their life, and many of the people of our closest friends, and what they fell into, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saved us, alhamdulillah. So when the transformation happened, my family was happy when they saw the impact that this had on me. So they didn't really care. And they thought it might be like a phase, a fad, where you'll come back to your old ways. But the fact is good. I remember my grandfather talking to one of his army buddies. He was in World War II, and he was telling that I don't know what it is. They have this mosque, they have this Quran. He said, I don't know what it is exactly, but I like it. He said the boy's changed. He said he's at home on time. He's respectful. He's always helping around the house, not doing the bad things he used to, just reading his book. So he said, whatever it is, it's good. I like it. I'm here talking to his friend. I was like, oh, it's good. He likes it. So and one of the things that I focused on was taking care of my grandmother, because she's the one who really raised me. My mother was always at work. So I used to read to her the Quran, and I told her about Islam. And I said to her after I explained, because when I explained to her what we believed and the difference between Islam and Christianity, wallahi, it was like she saw a ghost. As we say, that's the expression we use. She was like this, So I said, do you believe in what I'm saying? It was difficult for her to talk, but she understood very well. And she said, yes. And I said, if you believe it, then testify after me. And I said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. And she repeated after me, alhamdulillah. Ended up traveling not too long after that to study overseas. I asked many of the scholars, will her shahada be accepted? Because she never did anything after that. I never taught her to do anything after that. And they said, inshallah, her shahada was accepted. And she, inshallah, died as a Muslim, inshallah ta'ala. And after that's very precious to me, because she was the closest one to me. As I said, the one who raised me during the young age. And I had a very close relationship with my grandmother. So, and even I remember that I used to visit her, even like in the life of crime. One time I came to visit her, and she had a new neighbor, so she saw me the way I was dressed, the gangster-looking style, and she called the police. This dude is trying to break into the house of our poor old neighbor. Husband's not there. He's going to rob the old lady, and she's trying to open the door. She's in a wheelchair. Eventually, she opens it. So she's thinking I'm like prying at the door, right? So I'm sitting there talking to my grandmother, and all of a sudden, doof, 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 I see the police at the door. So I ended up, I remember I had this big knife in my front pocket, which could do it could be about a year in prison. So I slip it out of my right pocket and I put it into the couch, and I get up and I go and I talk him at the door. And then I remember that as I'm talking to them, I have about $500 worth of crack in my left pocket, which can be about 5 years in prison. So that's what should have went into the couch, but it didn't, So they're talking to me and they're talking to my grandmother. I'm like, I hope they get convinced that I'm not robbing the lady, because if they check me, I'm going to prison. But alhamdulillah, they didn't check me, and they ended up, the story worked out. My grandma says my grandson, she was able to speak enough for them to understand. Everything was cool. And many times when you see many things like that where I was saved, I can tell you many stories, alhamdulillah. But that's how it all happened, how I ended up being guided to Islam. I think we're about out of time, and the brothers want to get to 8:30 appointment. And there's obviously a very long story after that about how I ended up seeking knowledge and things like that. But inshallah, perhaps that could be for another night, inshallah. When we come to London at Humera, inshallah ta'ala, we'll come and talk about what came after that, inshallah ta'ala. That's how it all led up, and how the drugs, subhanAllah, something very negative, ended up being something, was a positive thing for me, ended up guiding me to Islam, alhamdulillah. And we look back on it, it was a crazy trip. We said alhamdulillah that Allah has blessed us what we have now. We look back at where we were and where we would have been. And even many of my friends before Islam, they thought I was crazy. I started coming around to them and visit them with turbans and thobes, and they was like, what's up with this dude? But they said, we're happy for you, because all of them thought, he said, you especially, you were dead, you were going to die, or you're going to be in prison. They said, if Islam has saved you, this is a beautiful thing for you. Wish you all the best. So they were actually very supportive, which actually helped me. But back to one story that I forgot to mention, back to that hill. And one of the things that actually helped me is that I went and, spent a bit of time in my local prison after I became Muslim for something I did before. And I got out in about a week, and they threw a party for me. It was like a 2-day party. So I ended up, kind of going away from Islam for those 2 days. And something my friend said on that hill had a huge impact on me, which was, he said, look at so-and-so. He says he's a Muslim, but he said he's doing just like we're doing. He doesn't do anything else. And he's no difference between him and us. And that had a huge impact. It was like lightning, and hit me, boom, Or maybe like Anthony Joshua, hit, What's the other dude's name? The other guy, the guy who just won recently. What's his name? No, I'm not really into boxing. I do. Wilder. Yeah, that dude can hit, man. Wow, huh? It's like one of those to the chest, right? Boom. So it's like it hit me really hard, man. Yeah, he knew right away. You can see, huh? He knows who's in a hurry to get out of here, huh? So it was like a hit to my chest. Bismillah, and it really had an impact on me. And that was actually a life-changing experience for me, where I went home and asked myself, why did you become Muslim? Don't you want to get closer to Allah, learn your religion? So I stopped going out with my friends, stopped doing this, and started committing myself to the masjid and learning more about my religion. Alhamdulillah, and it went from there, alhamdulillah. Barakallahu feekum, jazakallahu khair. Once again, thank you everyone for coming out during this night where most people want to be elsewhere, watching other things. Jazakumullahu khairan.